And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, the fallout from Equifax, the data of 143 million customers, or nearly half the U.S., may be compromised by a massive data breach at one of the largest credit monitoring agencies. We discuss the unprecedented damage control operation underway and the potential risks ahead. Plus, China's cryptocurrency coup de grace. After dealing the market a major blow by outlawing ICOs, Chinese regulators may pull the plug on digital exchanges behind the Great Wall. We examine the ripple effect on world markets. And anticipation goes into overdrive with just a few days to go until Apple's most significant product launch in years. We'll preview the event and the new technology. But first, to our lead, the massive cyber attack on credit monitoring company Equifax that may have compromised the privacy of more than 140 million U.S. customers, or half the U.S. population. Equifax stock plunged nearly 13% today amid mounting outrage over the breach. On Thursday evening, a proposed class action lawsuit was filed in Portland, Oregon, federal court alleging Equifax was negligent in failing to protect consumer data. There's also news that Equifax executives sold nearly $2 million in corporate stock before disclosing the attack. Equifax is one of the 3 biggest credit reporting companies, a super powerful entity that generated $3.1 billion in revenue last year. Congress said it'll probe the attack, and New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has opened an investigation, saying in a letter to the credit monitoring company, this: the Equifax breach has potentially exposed sensitive personal information of nearly everyone with a credit report, and my office intends to get to the bottom of how and why this massive hack occurred. Joining me now to discuss, our guest host for the hour, Technalysis president and founder Bob O'Donnell, as well as our Bloomberg executive editor Tom Giles. And Tom, you've been following this closely for the last 24 hours.
Non-stop.
You're very fired up about this. I mean, if you have a credit card, should you assume that you're affected?
Yes. This is the organization, this is the credit rating agency that keeps every piece of information about every financial decision you've made, basically. Every good one, bad one, every time you miss a payment. I'm not saying I ever do. Every credit card you open, every credit card you close. It's their job. It's their one job to safeguard this information, to store it, and to disseminate it. And we have no control over that. They have let the public down in the most profound way. This is what lawmakers are saying. This is what the public is saying. There is so much outrage over this. In a time when D.C. cannot agree on anything, everyone is in agreement in D.C. over the fact that these guys have blown it here, massively botched things, and they need to be regulated. That's the message we're getting uniformly from D.C., as we've been reporting here on Bloomberg.
And to top it off, they have a website that you can log on to see if you've been affected. The website didn't work, and you were also in the fine print signing away your rights to sue them.
Exactly, which is ridiculous. And exactly to Tom's point, I mean, this is their job. And I mean, this is by far the most massive cyber attack that we've seen, and the most important in the fact that the type of data that was hit was so critical.
This isn't just email addresses like with Yahoo, which affected more people.
Exactly.
This is your Social Security card.
It's exactly it. And it raises huge questions, not only about regulation, which I completely agree with, but we also have to start thinking about different ways of doing identification, right? These are issues that have come up in the past. You know, why are we still using things like Social Security numbers? We have to think about digital identities of a different sort, biometric authentication, all the other kinds of things that we've been talking about. If this doesn't drive that forward, I'm not sure what's going to.
And to top it off, I mean, you may not know that Equifax even has your information because they get this information from banks. They get this information from retailers. They may not be getting this information even directly from you. And we're talking about Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers. Now, talk to me about this stock situation where executives sold stock. They found out about this in May. Executives sold stock.
So the company found out about it on July 29th.
Yeah.
Within a few days, you saw senior executives at the company selling stock, and these were not part of prearranged stocks that automatically happen like we see so many times. Now, to be fair, the company has said to us that those individuals, the CFO and a couple of other high-ranking individuals, did not know about the breach. So that's
why not?
Why wouldn't they have known, right?
And why didn't they tell us sooner?
When this kind of thing, you know, general counsel knows, you would hope the CEO knows, but what Equifax is saying is that they didn't know about it.
But why not
it's a great
tell
question:
people
is
sooner
why
so
shouldn't all the senior executives know about something?
Right.
It's possible that maybe Equifax didn't know the scope, the scale of the breach. You know, people are attacked all the time. We're constantly fending off people who are trying to penetrate our systems. So we don't know exactly whether there was wrongdoing.
But Brad, even if we didn't know how much was done, the fact that it's a credit reporting agency took this long is clearly not okay, right? I mean, I understand your point, and you're right, because they don't often know, and sometimes they realize this leads to this, which leads to this, but still, fundamentally, they knew they had been attacked. Right. And that's going to affect a lot of people, and they didn't tell people. So over the last month, who knows what could have happened that people didn't know about.
Exactly. So consumers are feeling pretty helpless right now. I mean, what can you do? If not this website, what can you do?
So there is a website, there is a phone number, and what Equifax is doing is it is offering monitoring services. It is helping. It is offering
without
identity
waiving your
theft.
right to sue.
No, that's the point. Is when you go in there, you automatically, by signing up for it, are agreeing to arbitration. Now, how enforceable that is, because there already is a massive class action that's been brought against them. How enforceable? I'm not entirely sure, and I don't know whether you will be able to sign on. But lawmakers are very incensed over the idea that it does feel a bit underhanded and sneaky that you, in desperation, are going, I got to find out if I was affected. And people may not be reading the fine print.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, I know I was one of the people that got hit by one of the previous credit card attacks. So ironically, I already had an account at Equifax, you know, that was given to me for free by one, I forget which one it even was.
So what are you doing? What did you do?
Well, I'm just going to go check, but I hadn't checked it in a while, right? I checked it when that first happened. It was, you know, from a hotel that did something or other. But the bottom line is, yeah, all you can do is sit there and monitor all your credit card charges and everything else, but that is very tedious, and it's still not a great answer to the fundamental problem.
It is very important that you keep track of what's coming in and out of your accounts, check the credit cards, check your bank balance, keep really close tabs on it. It is a pain, no question about it, but you need to be vigilant.
Yeah.
So upsetting. All right, Tom Giles, our executive editor for tech, thank you. Keep us posted. Bob O'Donnell of Technalysis, you are sticking with me. All right, Qualcomm lost a bid to force 4 Apple contract manufacturers to resume paying hundreds of millions of dollars in royalties for technology used in iPhones. A federal judge in San Diego denied Qualcomm's request for an order that would make the contractors, including Foxconn and Pegatron, to resume payments they halted after Apple stopped reimbursing them. The judge also rejected Qualcomm's proposal to limit its legal fight with Apple to the U.S., saying not all of the issues can be resolved by an American court. Apple has accused Qualcomm of monopolizing the market on chips for wireless devices and withholding $1 billion in retaliation for cooperating with South Korean antitrust authorities. Coming up, a major wrench has been thrown into China's cryptocurrency market. Why China decided to slam the door on the $150 billion market next. This is Bloomberg. Now to Bitcoin, falling as much as 7.3% in the U.S. Friday. This after a report claimed the Chinese government is planning to ban cryptocurrency exchanges. It's the second blow to the nearly $150 billion global cryptocurrency market. Earlier this week, China also outlawed initial coin offerings. Joining us now to discuss, Olaf Carlson, founder and CEO of Polychain Capital, a hedge fund that invests in digital currencies. And still with us, our guest host for the hour, Technalysis president Bob O'Donnell. So, Olaf, you run the largest cryptocurrency hedge fund in the world. What does this mean?
Well, so I think that it's still unclear what the full picture looks like out of China. It is clear that the Chinese government has banned ICOs, or so-called initial coin offerings. I think it's still unclear what the status is of cryptocurrency exchanges in China. I do know that many exchanges have proactively delisted many coins that were launched through these so-called ICOs in response to that regulation.
So I know you're no stranger to volatility, but what does this mean for your business?
Oh, well, so we operate in highly volatile markets, like many different hedge fund strategies that actually operate outside of cryptocurrencies. So we're prepared for this sort of volatility. And actually, if you look historically, this isn't that unusual for the larger cryptocurrency space.
Bob, we were talking just a couple weeks ago about the regulatory issues. I mean, do you think other countries will follow China?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, we obviously just saw at the same time that China went this way, Russia went the other way. So clearly, I think there's a lot of discovery still going on. You know, there's still a lot of fundamental questions. You've got issues with people not really understanding this. And whenever there's a lack of understanding, that creates uncertainty. And of course, there's the association there has been with, anonymous payments for nefarious purposes. The other issue still that I think people have to reconcile with, and even I admit, I'm kind of curious, when I look at all these different currencies, it kind of feels like everybody's just deciding we're going to mint our own money, and we're going to mint our own money, and if we convince each other to buy each other's, and we kind of build up this little club of people, and it feels a little pyramid-like, almost in a way.
Olaf, I want you to respond to that. But before you do, Russia getting into Bitcoin mining this week is what Bob was alluding to there. But what do you make of the skeptics' perception?
So I do think there's a lot of noise in this space. So I think there's a lot of different people working on a lot of different things, and it's often unclear what's really happening and what are the real technologists building. But I think amidst a lot of this noise and kind of lots of different people working on lots of different projects, there are, within this, some really brilliant technological visionaries that are actually building the future of our financial systems, and not just in the United States, but actually globally.
But how much value is it going to have? I mean, is there more value in the blockchain, or is there more value in the actual monetary value of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies?
So, I think this technology is much bigger than any individual company. I think this is one of the major kind of killer applications of the internet itself. So in my mind, the opportunity space here is absolutely in the trillions of dollars. Like the value of these underlying protocols that power the future financial systems of the world over the internet, I think will be worth trillions of dollars.
And I can see that happening. I guess one of the questions that I have that I just still struggle with a bit is, how many blockchains of different currencies can the world really support? Like, it's one of these, it's a classic case of this may be a great idea, but a great idea times a million becomes a lot less great idea. And that's what it feels like we're heading towards.
Yeah, and I do agree that, right now there's a lot of competition in this space, and it's a lot of different developers working on these various blockchain protocols, all vying to create the platform that becomes, the primary one used for future applications. So there's a lot of competition right now. I think that's part of why there is so much noise. But in the end, what that leads to is actually the best technology and the best teams rising to the top.
Does it lead to, I'm curious, does it lead to the fact that just as there's really one internet, there is ultimately one blockchain?
No, not quite. It's more like there's lots of websites. Like there might be lots of different tokens or cryptocurrencies.
And would all those sites be on the same internet?
Well, so it gets complicated, frankly. So you have individual blockchains, which are basically individual ledgers. But now a lot of technology is coming out called parachains, which actually allow you to it allows interaction between various blockchains. So now you can have logic execute on one blockchain, but actually trigger an event on a second blockchain. So I think the future we're going towards, it's actually hard to foresee what will happen because this technology moves so quickly.
So we know how China is approaching this, now how Russia is approaching this. What line of sight do you have on how the U.S. government will approach this? I mean, it's obviously of great interest to you knowing where to put your money.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in general, regulators both on a federal level and on a state level in the United States have created really thoughtful legislation around this area. So recently, for example, the SEC put out a memo regarding kind of initial coin offerings and tokens. I thought it was really thoughtful, and I thought in general it was a very accurate, well-researched memo. So I'm optimistic that coherent regulation will be put in place. That'll actually be good for innovation and good for the industry because it'll create a sort of framework through which entrepreneurs can act in good faith. But that on top of that, I don't foresee that regulation being sort of draconian and actually squelching what is a very nascent emergent technology with a lot of potential.
Do you think it drives the need for some sort of centralization, though, in the same way that even with the internet, you have ICANN that gives out addresses, and there's a few centralized organizations. That seems another area that is still lacking in blockchain and cryptocurrency.
30 seconds left.
Yeah, so
that complicated.
Yeah, it's a complicated question, but I actually fully agree with that. So governance of these actual underlying blockchain protocols is something that's very, very interesting. And a lot of technological development is going into how to determine the path forward for these various protocols. So some new protocols, like for example, Tezos, it's a protocol with voting using the underlying cryptocurrency to actually determine the path forward for that for those protocol rules.
All right. I'm going to try to digest everything you just said. Olaf, Carlson, we thank you so much for continuing to school us in the ways of cryptocurrencies. Polychain Capital founder, great to have you on the show. Bob O'Donnell, you're sticking with me. All right, football season has officially kicked off, and the daily fantasy sports company FanDuel is gearing up for a busy season. Up next, we hear from CEO Nigel Eccles on his predictions for upcoming matchups. This is Bloomberg. Blue Apron has lost its second biggest investor. According to data compiled by Bloomberg, Capital World Investors has sold its 12.9% stake in the company. Blue Apron has struggled with production issues and recently imposed a hiring freeze. Shares have fallen more than 45% since going public in June. Well, Thursday night's game between the New England Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs marked the kickoff of the 2017 NFL season. The matchup served up a surprising result, with the Chiefs earning a win against the Super Bowl winning Patriots. The start of the season also means that daily fantasy football back in full swing. Earlier, Bloomberg's Scarlett Fu caught up with FanDuel CEO Nigel Eccles in New York. She started by asking about the impact of the upset win on fantasy sports leagues.
This is going to be an exciting season. I think we're going to see a lot of really exciting stories come out, and I think we're going to see some exciting breakthrough players. And from a fantasy angle, that's what you get excited about. Who are those sleepers that no one thought about, that suddenly I need to have that guy on my fantasy team?
Right, 16 different storylines as opposed to a storyline for the entire season. Yes. What kind of links do you see or have you seen between declining NFL TV ratings and, of course, engagement in daily fantasy sports?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So last year we saw significant declines in NFL ratings. And a lot of focus on that, a lot of talk about, was it the election, was it these sort of one-time events? I think the more interesting stat is viewership among millennials, which has declined for 3 straight years. We are seeing a macro shift among younger sports fans who are saying, I'm not going to sit for 3.5 hours and watch sports on linear television. It needs to come to me. And so I think we're going to see a continued decline there unless the league and all the leagues are focusing on this and finding a way to engage those millennials to then grow their audience.
It was pretty much of a shock for the NFL to see that kind of decline in ratings last year. Which league do you think is picking up on that the best, understands it the best?
I think the NBA is very clearly the one. Like they have a strategy of, we need to be where the millennial is. Like, we want to be on Facebook, we need to be on Snapchat. And some people are even saying, are they giving away too much content that you don't watch the linear? But I don't think they have a choice. They need to be relevant. They need to be where that consumer is. I'll give you another example. NBC, which is an investor in us, made a huge investment in Snapchat, and they said, whenever the Olympics come around, our biggest fear is that they don't even know it happened, because they were on Snapchat, they weren't on TV, they couldn't be marketed to. And so NBC have done a great job of being on Snapchat, being where that audience is, so they know the Olympics is coming.
Yeah, it's certainly, you've got many, many offerings if you are a sports fan, or even a casual sports fan for that matter. Let's talk a little bit about your business. Sure. You and DraftKings called off your merger back in July. Both companies are now going at it alone. What are you doing differently now than before the planned merger?
Sure. So it's quite a lot of things that we've been working on for a number of years. What we're really seeing fruition today, I think one of the biggest ones is social. Fantasy sports, most people play fantasy sports because they want to play in a league with friends for really social reasons. And ours was a variant of that that created sort of the excitement of big prize pools, of instant win or win in a day. But what we felt was missing was sort of the social ability to do that with your friends. And what we've done, launched this year is Friends Mode Championship, which allows you to create that league of friends, but you play in a daily format every weekend. So you're not stuck with, if you picked a running back who's suddenly injured, you're not stuck with that player through the season. You can actually, the next week, you can pick an entirely new league, or a new player, and that league persists through the season with your group of friends.
Okay, so more flexibility for each player.
Yeah, and playing with your friends.
And of course, we've seen a lot of the ads pop up as well. Both you and DraftKings, as we know, burned through a lot of cash on marketing and advertising 2 years ago as independent companies. What did you learn from that period, and what kind of adjustments are you making?
Yeah, so 2015 really was about getting the brand out there. 2014, people just had never heard of us. 2015, that changed. Obviously, we spent a lot of money, and it was very successful in that way. It brought on other challenges, which we all know about, and we've really worked through. But what we've done in our marketing since then is to really focus on why you play and put the product very front and center in the ad. And if you see our ad, you will see the product is near in every shot, because when we talk to our players, it's a star. They just love that product experience. To give you a stat, on NFL Sunday, our players will spend at least an hour on our app on average. So they have it open all the way through the games. They love it. We talk to our players and we say, if you had to delete every app on your phone apart from like 5 or 6 or 7 apps, which ones would it be? And on that list is FanDuel. Like, it is one of the top 7 apps because it's something that they know gives them so much excitement and engagement, enjoyment, particularly on a Sunday, that they need that.
FanDuel CEO there, Nigel Eccles. Coming up, more on the Equifax hack that may have struck nearly half the size of the American population. We take a look at the state of global cybersecurity next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Now back to our lead, the Equifax data breach. Hackers stole sensitive information on as many as 143 million people, including social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, credit card numbers, driver's licenses. And because Equifax gets its information from a variety of places like banks, credit card companies, and retailers, the people affected may not even know that Equifax had their data. Joining me now to discuss one of the largest data breaches on record, Anthony Ferrante, Senior Managing Director at FTI Consulting. He has also served under both Presidents Obama and Trump on the National Security Council and spent over a decade at the FBI, where he was Chief of Staff for the Cyber Division at the FBI headquarters. So first of all, Anthony, what is your reaction to this incredible and wide-ranging attack?
Emily, you said it well. It's an incredible cyber breach. And I think the scope and scale is still yet to be determined, but I think it is safe to say that this breach is going to affect every single family in America.
So what do we do?
Well, that's a great question. I still don't think we're getting clear messaging from Equifax. Their messaging on their website said that criminals hacked their system. But I would like clarification from Equifax. Do they mean that these are financially motivated actors, or are these just criminal hackers that broke into their system for the purpose of stealing this information, for example, like the OPM breach, for the purposes of intelligence information on U.S. citizens? Still to be determined.
Tom Giles, our executive editor for Tech, was on the show earlier and made the point that obviously, yes, this information is desirable, but protecting it is the most important job for a company like this. Why would they have a vulnerability, or such a large vulnerability, in their system?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we're definitely going to need answers to. The fact that they were the custodian of this data is a huge responsibility. It's one of the first questions we ask our clients when we meet with them. What is your most critical asset, and what are you doing to protect that asset? In many cases, their asset is that information. And as we've seen over the last few months and years, information can not only be an asset, but it can be a liability. And in this case, it looks like it's going to be a liability.
So you work with the FBI, you work with both presidents. What does the FBI do now? What does the White House do now?
That's a great question. In my experience, I would consider this event a significant event. I think it's fair to say, based on the U.S. government's cyber incident severity schema, that this is likely to result in demonstrable impact to public confidence. I think it's safe to say that the public confidence is shooken, and we need to better understand what is going on here and who's been affected by this. And I think it's fair to say that the U.S. government is scrambling their cyber response efforts to better understand the scope and scale and the impact and potential impact here.
So all of this information we can assume is out there now on the dark web, active credit card numbers. What happens now? What happens to that information?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that investigators are going to have to dig into. The credit card information, I'm not so worried about. It's more about the personally identifiable information. All the information you need to open up a mortgage on a home or get a line of credit at a bank. I mean, this was more than just personally identifiable information. This is everything about every American family in the United States. And what's worse is that American citizens, they didn't consent to give this information. Like, for example, in the Home Depot or the Target breaches, citizens actually went to those stores and shopped there. In this case, Equifax obtained this information from other providers. Some people didn't even know their information was stored at Equifax.
Okay, so we talked earlier about the website that Equifax is asking customers to log on to try to figure out what happened to their data, that website requires these customers to waive their right to sue the company. If you're a customer, you or I, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I think we're going to see that change pretty quickly. There's already been response by various attorney generals around the country. I think the reality is that millions of people's personally identifiable information was stolen, and Equifax needs to immediately implement measures to protect their identity and to ensure that further harm is not affected on these individuals.
And what are the potential global risks out there from other countries, rogue states?
Well, I mean, there's risk everywhere, especially cybersecurity risks. The internet, the interconnection of computers allows these actors to commit these sort of acts from the comfort of their living room. And the reality is that the more and more we evolve, technology evolves, the more and more risk is introduced into our lives. We have actors, criminal actors to nation-state actors that pose risks to our way of life and business operations every day.
You know, and on that note, not to absolve Equifax of responsibility here, but we certainly don't know what protections they had in place. Is it even possible in this world where technology powers everything to make a company, make data like this hack-proof?
Well, I don't think there's such thing as a silver bullet when it comes to cybersecurity, but there are definitely steps companies can take to ensure that their most critical information is stored safely and securely. And that is the first thing we talk about when we meet with our clients, is what is your most critical asset, and then we work diligently with them to protect that asset. And I think it's important. Every company needs to consider the risks from a 360-degree view, because these risks can come from physical threats to cyber threats.
All right, Anthony Ferrante, Senior Managing Director at FTI Consulting. Thanks so much. Great to have your perspective on this. All right, well, Hurricane Harvey has been destructive. It has also been called a seminal moment for drone operators, proving that they can effectively map flooding, locate people in need of rescue, and verify damage to speed up insurance claims. There's also a downside to this tech, though. Licensed humanitarian crews say it's attracted irresponsible users who have hampered emergency crews and are more interested in making a social media splash. But until an air traffic system for small drone usage is created, this remains an issue. Coming up, yet another legal battle is barreling towards Uber. Next, we'll bring you all the details on the FBI's probe into the company. That's next, and this weekend on Bloomberg TV, we will bring you our best interviews from the week, including our exclusive conversation with Dell Technologies CEO Michael Dell, who gives us an update on the company's one-year anniversary after completing its massive acquisition of EMC. Tune in this Saturday for the best of Bloomberg Technology. This is Bloomberg. The shift from diesel to electric or hybrid cars in Europe is pushing ahead at a rapid pace. Now Uber has set a new benchmark, saying vehicles used by the app's UberX service in London will be hybrid or fully electric by the end of 2019, with plans to install Uber-branded charging stations within the city in the next few weeks. The company claims more than half of UberX London journey miles already are hybrid or fully electric. Well, the FBI investigating whether Uber used software to illegally interfere with its rivals in New York. That's according to people familiar with the matter. Federal prosecutors and FBI agents have been investigating a program nicknamed Hell at Uber that allegedly allowed the company to spy on drivers from competing service Lyft. It's the latest hurdle for the embattled ride-hailing giant, which is facing 2 other investigations from U.S. authorities. Joining us now to discuss, our Bloomberg Tech reporter Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber, and still with us, our guest host for the hour, Technalysis Research President Bob O'Donnell. So, Eric, what exactly is Uber accused of doing here?
So they're using this program, which they terribly, unstrategically named Hell, to just like idiots. I think they would say that now. You know, to sort of examine the Lyft app and sort of see where drivers are and potentially figure out what drivers they could then recruit to be Uber drivers instead.
So how did they do that?
Yeah, it's sort of complicated. I mean, I think it's a bit of software scraping sort of the Lyft app to try and, like, through technology, understand sort of all this free information that Lyft was probably unintentionally giving away, that Uber figured out, okay, we shouldn't show it in our app so they can't get it, but use that information to then sort of have a leg up over the competitor.
Well, and it raises a very interesting question about these services in general, because this kind of data scraping theoretically could happen lots of places, right?
Is it even illegal?
Well, it's a question of, you know, terms of service, as Eric mentioned. I mean, there's a number of things that could potentially be very dicey, you know, from a legal perspective, and it does raise the question of, does this sort of thing need to be monitored more closely? Does there need to be some kind of actual legal control over that? I mean, are there certain things that need to be prevented? Because once all these data services start getting out there, this is exactly what could happen in a lot of other areas. Uber got caught first, and they were clearly very aggressive about this, as
on
they
the
have
cutting edge of competition. I think
exactly. That's a good way of putting it. But, you know, fundamentally, it's, you know, this is reflective of what Uber has been, or had been, perhaps, we shall see. But again, the bigger question in my mind is, how does this get played out in other places and other industries?
Yeah.
Right. So, and what could the consequences be here?
Well, we know the FBI is investigating.
Right.
So that is not a group of people that I think companies want to be investigated by. But I mean, I don't think we know the exact statute that they could be accused of, or what the consequences are. Right now, we know there's this inquiry, and that's where things stand.
And of course, this isn't the only thing that Uber has potentially done wrong. We've also got the Gray Ball campaign, which authorities are also looking into, right?
So Gray Ball was another sort of crafty software trick. That was, if I'm a law enforcement official, Uber would basically try and figure out, okay, you seem to work for the government. We want to make it hard for you to chase down our drivers in areas where we might not be allowed to operate. And while you wouldn't know your app is different than me, Joe Consumer, it would be, and so it'd be harder for you to find sort of scofflaw Uber drivers.
It's kind of like back to that God mode. Like, they could track where certain celebrities were because they'd see who was calling up an Uber. I mean, it all goes back to having that control over a lot of data that people don't recognize has a lot of underlying value, so to speak.
Now, the new CEO has just started.
Yeah.
A lot on his plate. What are you hearing about how it's going so far and how he might approach these kinds of issues?
I mean, I think, you know, he started Tuesday. He's taking things in, having meetings with his top executives, a very busy schedule. And I mean, certainly he knew that there were legal issues when he joined. I mean, one board member suing another at the moment, and now it's an arbitration. But there are lots of legal questions going on at Uber. But these sort of federal Justice Department sort of inquiries, are very serious. We didn't even mention the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that's also being investigated. So we've got three. We've got HEL, Greyball, and FCPA.
Which is?
So if you're Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and that's like, we know it's something over bribery, probably in a foreign country. We're still trying to figure out which foreign country and what exactly the incident was, but we know there's an inquiry there. And, there's no reason, I mean, there are a lot of questions.
Piling up. Yeah. All right, Eric Newcomer, thank you for keeping us updated. Bob O'Donnell is sticking with me. All right, coming up, just a few more days until Apple rolls out the red carpet at its brand new campus for one of the most important product events it has had in years. We'll hear from Gene Munster with Loup Ventures about what he's excited for next. This is Bloomberg. Samsung is sharing a few details around customer demand after the release of its Note 8. According to the company, more people in the U.S. have purchased the Galaxy Note 8 model than previous Samsung Note phones in the same period. The phone will be available in stores September 15th. Meantime, Apple has sold more than 1 billion iPhones since it was launched 10 years ago. And although the company changed the tech landscape forever with its smartphone, Apple has been facing an uphill battle the last few years with growing competition and slowing sales in China. So can the new iPhone, that's reportedly going to have big changes, usher Apple into a new era? Bloomberg Markets spoke with Gene Munster, co-founder of Loup Ventures and a veteran Apple analyst.
Consumers now know that it's going to be tight supply. Last year, it hit supply-demand equilibrium for the iPhones not until the end of December. And so I don't think that that's... I'll just add one other quick point about that is remember the debacle around Samsung a year ago, and that almost had no impact on the iPhone business. People who were committed to Android and Samsung stayed committed, and I think the iPhone users will equally stay committed.
Now, as usual, Gene, we have gotten a lot of nibbles, leaks, et cetera, about what the Apple announcement is going to entail. In terms of what we don't know, what are you most looking for? What do you want to know from Apple on Tuesday?
Probably the two things that are kind of on that edge is, are they going to come out with a wireless Apple Watch? So it would not need to be paired with an iPhone. So be able to take phone calls and text messages with just the watch. So it's referred to as an LTE version of Apple Watch. I think that the probability of that is less likely, but some people are speculating that that's going to happen. That's going to be a great product for Apple when they do that. It's a function of time. And the second piece that we're looking for is something around content. Apple's made some recent hires. They've got some new office space in Hollywood, and they've made some comments regarding original content. And it's unlikely, but we might get a chance to see that. And then I'll just throw a third thing on that I'm really excited about is just a chance to see the Steve Jobs Theater. I mean, that was his kind of last and final product, and I think people are eagerly waiting to see what that looks like.
Gene Munster there of Loup Ventures. Still with me, Bob O'Donnell of Technalysis. So I want to talk about the China question because sort of lots of excitement about the new iPhone, but others are saying, look, you can get phones in China that are just as good and a lot cheaper. Is that true?
Well, it is true. I mean, when you look at what Apple's done, particularly over the last couple of years, they've been all about perfecting technologies that other people have done first. That's the claim. And so a lot of those technologies actually appear first in China. And what you found is that Chinese consumers have actually become more accustomed to that as a result. And so you've seen Apple struggle a bit in China. You know, Tim Cook has talked about how critically important China is to Apple, and yet they've been struggling there. And so the question is, will the new phones really overcome that? There has been the brand cachet that Apple's had, but there are concerns that, especially at some of the price points being talked about for the new design, can they maintain that? Or, you know, and will things like Chinese nationalism drive Huawei and Oppo and Vivo and Xiaomi, all those big phone companies that are now beating Apple in the China market?
So I get the price, that it's cheaper, but when it comes to the features, what do these companies do better than Apple?
Well, they've had these edge-to-edge displays for a long time. Huawei was the first with 2 cameras. So some things like that have become important for a lot of people. So it's areas like that. And if you look at what Samsung just did, you know, with the Note 8 we were talking about, it's got multiple cameras. It's got those beautiful edge-to-edge displays. You know, my concern, to be honest with you, the big question for me is if the iPhone X or whatever it is so good from a design perspective, and there's no other less expensive step-down version, will that hurt the sales? Because they're going to have a 7S and a 7S Plus, which are going to be very similar. But if the other one is so cool, but really expensive, how does that impact, you know, the sales? That's the big question mark for me.
You don't think people would just buy the 7S instead?
I don't know. If they see that other one go, well, that's really what I want, and they don't have a way to fall back. Whereas if you look at the Note 8, if people say, I like it, but it's too expensive, I can go back to the S8. It's a couple $100 less, but I get the same basic design. That's the comparison difference that I think is going to be important to look at.
What are the other main things you're going to be watching for on Tuesday?
The other thing, you know, Gene mentioned other devices. They're clearly going to do a 4K Apple TV and some other devices. The devices themselves aren't important, but they're interesting from a services perspective. You know, Apple's talking a lot about services and content, and so what these are going to drive is more services, movie content, potentially music content if they talk more about HomePod and some of the things they're doing with that. So those are the things I'm going to be looking for as well.
Steve Jobs Theater. You're going to be there.
Oh,
right?
yeah, I'm going to be there. Oh, yeah,
excited
and of
to
course,
see it.
yeah.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, no, I was going to say no one's been there, so that's going to be very exciting. Just that in and of itself is going to add an aura, you know, to the whole event, and they knew that. And I think that's really going to drive a lot of discussion around. But boy, man, there's a lot on the line for these guys long term, and if delays that have been recently reported do impact them, especially on the nice new design phone, you know, that could be an issue. Look, it's going to do great. It's an iPhone. People are going to buy the new iPhone. There's no question about it. But fundamentally, how does it impact the mix? That's the question.
Right, and we'll be watching for those dates to see, you know, just how quickly they will start shipping. Bob O'Donnell of Technalysis, I'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see all of you as well. Tune into Bloomberg TV for our special coverage of the Apple event. We'll be live in Cupertino and have reaction with a great roundup of guests. All kicks off Tuesday, 1 p.m. New York time. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.